Have you ever heard a story so powerful it makes you question everything you thought you knew about life, justice, and fate? Imagine a man sentenced to spend the rest of his days behind bars, suddenly being pulled out of the darkness by two people he had once saved decades earlier. He had almost forgotten them, but they had never forgotten him. This is the unbelievable story of how a black man who opened his home to two homeless white kids changed their lives forever, and how, 20 years later, those very same kids returned to stop his life sentence. Before we dive into this story, make sure you subscribe, because we bring you the kind of stories that aren't just entertainment. They're reminders of humanity's greatest lessons that IT all began in the late 1990s, in a small, racially divided town in Alabama. To many, life there was a daily struggle. But for Marcus Reed, a young black man in his early 20s, survival wasn't just about making ends meet. It was about proving wrong every stereotype that weighed on him. Marcus was known for working long shifts at the local auto shop, fixing engines with hands calloused from years of labor. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't powerful, but he had a heart that didn't know how to turn away from someone in need. One cold winter night, on his way home from work, Marcus spotted two kids sitting by the gas station dumpster. They couldn't have been older than 10 or 11. Their clothes were ragged, their faces pale from hunger, and their eyes carried the kind of emptiness only kids who've seen too much pain too early could have. They were brothers, Ethan and Jacob. Their parents had abandoned them after sinking into addiction. Nobody in town had stepped up. People passed by them daily, shaking their heads, muttering about those kids as if they were invisible. But not Marcus. He walked up slowly, knelt down, and asked, "You boys eaten today?" The older one, Ethan, shrugged defensively, trying to act tough. The younger, Jacob, simply whispered. No, Marcus didn't hesitate. He bought them hot meals from the diner across the street, sat with them until they finished, and then asked the question that would change all of their lives. "Do you want a place to sleep tonight?" At first, they were suspicious. They didn't trust adults anymore, especially strangers. But something in Marcus's voice told them this man wasn't like the others. That night, they followed him home. His apartment was small, barely enough for one person, but he made space, laying blankets on the couch, cooking them breakfast the next morning, and telling them they were safe. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Marcus became more than just a guardian. He became family. He worked extra hours to put food on the table, helped them with homework, and taught them lessons about respect, hard work, and dignity. He never saw their skin color. Just two kids who needed love, but in a town where lines of race were deeply etched, not everyone saw it that way. People whispered behind his back. Some mocked him, saying, "Why is a black man raising two white kids?" Others spread darker rumors, painting him as suspicious simply because of who he was. Marcus ignored them. He only cared about Ethan and Jacob's future. For years, he kept them off the streets, made sure they stayed in school, and pushed them to dream bigger than the small town they were born into. But life, as it often does, wasn't finished testing Marcus. One fateful night in 2001, Marcus's world collapsed. A robbery had taken place at a liquor store just a block from his apartment. The clerk had been beaten badly, and the suspects were said to be a tall black man with a shaved head. Marcus fit the description. He was walking home from his night shift when police cruisers cornered him. Hands up, on the ground, confused and terrified, Marcus complied. He tried to explain that he had just gotten off work, that he knew nothing about any robbery, but the system didn't care. The town was desperate for someone to blame, and Marcus was an easy target. Within days, he was arrested, charged, and facing trial for a crime he didn't commit. Ethan and Jacob, still teenagers, were powerless to help. They begged neighbors to vouch for Marcus, but few stepped forward. In court, the prosecution painted him as violent, dangerous, and guilty beyond doubt. The fact that he had taken in two white kids, twisted against him, used to cast suspicion as if his kindness had darker motives. The jury, influenced by prejudice more than facts, convicted him. Marcus Reed was sentenced to life in prison. The gavel hit, and with it, everything he had built crumbled. The boys cried in the back row, clutching each other as their guardian, their protector, was led away in chains. For Marcus, prison became a test of endurance. The walls were cold, the food was scarce, and hope was dangerous. But he never stopped writing letters to Ethan and Jacob. He told them to stay in school, to chase their dreams, to never let bitterness consume them. He told them he was proud of them, no matter what. And the boys, they carried his words like scripture. Years passed. Ethan and Jacob grew into men. They went to college, something Marcus had always dreamed for them. Ethan became a lawyer. Jacob joined the military. They never forgot the man who had saved them when no one else cared. And they never forgot the injustice that stole his life. One night, now in their 30s, they sat together and said, "We can't let this be his ending." Ethan used his legal training to dig through old files. He found cracks in the case, the lack of physical evidence, the unreliable eyewitness testimony, the sloppy investigation. Jacob used his connections to track down the real suspects, men who had bragged years later about beating the system. Piece by piece, the brothers built a case, not just for Marcus's innocence, but for the corruption that had buried it. 20 years after the day Marcus was sentenced, they filed an appeal. When the hearing date came, the courtroom was packed. Marcus, older now, with gray at his temples, shuffled and wearing prison blues. He expected disappointment again, but then he looked across the room. Ethan and Jacob stood there, not as kids anymore, but as men, his sons in every way that mattered. The judge listened as Ethan argued passionately. "Your Honor, this man is innocent. He spent 2 decades behind bars because of prejudice, not proof. If not for Marcus Reed, my brother and I would not even be alive today. He saved us. Now we're here to save him." Witnesses testified. Records were re-examined. And then the moment came, the ruling. The judge's voice was steady as he said, "The conviction is overturned. Marcus Reed is free." The courtroom erupted. Jacob, in his military uniform, saluted Marcus as tears streamed down his face. Ethan hugged him so tightly Marcus thought he'd never let go. 20 years had been stolen. But that day, Marcus got his life back. When Marcus walked out of prison, the sun felt different. The air felt sharper. And waiting outside, a group of Marines stood at attention. Jacob had arranged it. They saluted Marcus, not as a prisoner, not as a victim, but as a man of honor. The story made headlines nationwide. People who once whispered against Marcus now whispered in shame. But Marcus didn't hold anger in his heart. "What's done is done," he told reporters. "What matters is the future." He moved in with Ethan and Jacob, who refused to let him live alone. Together, they built a foundation dedicated to helping foster kids, runaways, and wrongly convicted inmates. They called it the Reed House. And every child who walked through its doors heard the same words Marcus had once told 2 hungry boys outside a gas station. "You're safe here." Marcus's story became more than survival. It became a lesson that kindness never dies, that even when the system fails, love has a way of coming back around, that the smallest act, offering a meal, a blanket, a safe place, can echo decades later in ways you'd never imagined. He had been stabbed by life, sentenced unfairly, forgotten by many. But because he had once chosen compassion over indifference, his life was saved in return. When you hear the word hero, remember Marcus Reed. He never wore a cape, never carried a weapon, never held power. He just opened his door. And 20 years later, that simple act of kindness set him free. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more true-style stories that prove one thing: humanity, at its best, always find a way to shine through.